Hello everyone, welcome to StudyIQ. So we will continue our discussion on economy. We have started off with the module balance of payment, okay, and then so far we have completed 4 sessions in this particular module, and this is your 5th lecture. So in the first session we have actually talked about what you mean by balance of payment, and we have discussed about different accounts like trade account, invisible account, okay, and current account, capital account, and all the components in that. And we have discussed few concepts like trade deficit, invisible account deficit, okay, and then current account deficit or current account balance, capital account balance. All these things have been covered. And then we have discussed about balance of payment summary. I have given you actual data, and we have tried to understand what you mean by reserve change, how forex inflow and how forex outflow is understood, and how is it realized, and all those things is discussed. And we have also discussed about BOP equilibrium, balance of payment surplus, and BOP deficit. So this is what your first video. And in the second lecture, we have talked about certain indicators of balance of payment situation, and there we have covered entire concepts related to forex. I've told you the components of forex and how forex is changing. All these details have been done. We have talked about external debt, and we have shortly discussed about public debt also. In that context, we have discussed what is the what is the comfort zone in terms of current account deficit, and we have discussed that in detail. And after that, we have discussed about certain concepts like debt service ratio, sovereign wealth fund. All these things we have discussed. In the third lecture, we have talked about different exchange rate systems. There I have covered around 5 different exchange rate systems. Started off with the fixed exchange rate system, or the pegged exchange rate system, and then we have discussed about floating or flexible exchange rate system, and then we went on to discuss the wider band exchange rate system. Okay, we have discussed that in detail. And then we have discussed about crawling peg exchange rate system, and I've told you this is a kind of fixed exchange rate system, and China is following this system. And then we have discussed about managed float, and I have told you India is following this system, and why it is known as dirty float also I have told you. Okay, so managed float is also known as dirty float because central bank actually can manipulate to some extent with respect to the exchange rate of the currency. Okay, now how is it done? We have discussed it already. So if you have any doubt in any of my previous video, or if you haven't seen any video, you can just join this Telegram channel. You can find all the videos in this Telegram channel, which I've created only for sharing my videos, and then you can get in touch with me in this Instagram ID. Okay, so let me talk about that dirty float once again. See, why it is known as dirty float is because actually RBI can interfere. Now, how RBI is going to interfere? It is actually, I'm just talking about managed float, right? So when I'm talking about managed float, it is similar to floating. So obviously you need demand of dollar and supply of dollar, and who create demand? Okay, so demands are from importers demand dollar because they need to make their payments in terms of dollar. So importers demand dollar, and Indian investor investing abroad, they need dollar, so they create demand of dollar. Indian tourist who's visiting abroad, he also need dollar. Similarly, when forex is actually withdrawn from here by the foreign investors, they will take out dollar. Okay, so they also demand dollar. So these are the people who create demand. So we can actually draw a demand curve. So here it is quantity of dollar, and here it is price of dollar in terms of rupee. When you're talking about in terms of rupee, we'll write the price in terms of rupee. Like when we discussed about demand supply chapter, I've told you when we have taken banana, the quantity of banana or apple to explain that situation, I've told you the price of apple is what you're taking. So here also price of dollar, but that should be in terms of rupee. And now how demand curve will look like? It is a downward sloping curve. So this is your demand curve. So this is the demand of dollar. And then who provides supply? Exactly the opposite. Exporters will provide the supply of dollar, because when they're exporting, they'll actually receiving forex, so that is acting as supply of dollar. Similarly, a foreign investor who's investing in India, supplying dollar, he's coming with the forex, and a foreign tourist who's visiting India, supplying dollar. Okay, similarly, all these are actually examples of supply. So I'm not writing all this, we have discussed it in detail. So let me draw the supply curve now. So this is your supply of dollar. So supply curve will look upward, and it is an upward sloping curve. So now what is the equilibrium point? So this is the equilibrium point. Now let's say the price of dollar is, let's say, 65 rupee at the situation. Now imagine the case that there is a 10% increase in demand, or demand is increased. And I've told you how to show that increase in demand. Increase in demand, you will shift the curve to rightward. Okay, there will be a rightward shift in the demand curve. Some people, some text and some teachers will tell you that upward shift. It is in fact upward shift is correct, and in case of decrease in demand, downward shift is correct. But better to say rightward and leftward, because if I'm talking about demand, upward and increase means upward and decrease means leftward. But if I'm talking about supply, I can't use the same logic. In case of supply, it is actually reverse. Increase means downward, and decrease means upward. So you need to reverse, and that will lead to confusion. So it is always better to understand, in case of increase, make a rightward shift, whether it is supply or demand. So if you're talking in terms of rightward, I'll show you just here. You can see here, this is an increase, so rightward shift. So it is upward also, no problem in that. Increase in supply, it is actually, now you can shift rightward. This is a rightward shift, but effectively if you look at, this is actually downward. So there is a problem in understanding, so there may be confusion for some students. So it is always better to understand in terms of leftward and rightward. So here I'm gonna shift my demand curve rightward, because there is an increase in demand. So let me shift that like this. Okay, now you can see here the new point is this is a new point. So the price is actually increased to, let's say, 67, 68, something like that. So what happened here appreciation of dollar happened, and it effectively lead to depreciation of rupee. Appreciation of dollar and depreciation of rupee, both are the same. Okay, now what RBI can do in this situation? See, the problem here is supply is not increased but demand is increased. How can you solve this issue? If RBI is having excess forex with RBI can pump some dollar in the forex market. That means RBI can interfere in the forex market by supplying dollar. So let's suppose 10% demand is there extra, you provide 10% extra supply, then there won't be any problem. You can maintain the previous equilibrium. There won't be any change, or there won't be any appreciation of dollar or depreciation of rupee. So what would have happened here? Like the increase of dollar, you need an increase of supply like this. Now if there is an increase of supply like this, now this is a meeting point. So if that is a meeting point, you can see here that is actually leading to the same point. Okay, so 10% increase in demand, 10% supply is there, so there is no price change. Okay, so this is what RBI can do, and this is why it is not perfectly floating. This can be managed by the central bank. So it is also known as dirty float. Okay, and then we have discussed about different measures which are taken by government and RBI in the context of after that we have actually discussed about the causes of depreciation of rupee from 2011, and I've discussed a lot of causes. We have completed, we have done a very good discussion in that, and one session I've dedicated for that. And then we have also discussed about the measures taken by RBI and government. Okay, and in this video I'll be talking about, but one thing I have actually missed out is the exchange rate management policy of RBI. So exchange rate management policy of RBI. See, the exchange rate management policy, this question arises basically because of this dirty float. We are following managed float, okay, or it is also known as dirty float. That means RBI can interfere or intervene. So there is a question, what is the policy that we are following? Are we going for appreciation or are we going for depreciation of rupee? Because if we go for depreciation of rupee, there are a lot of advantages, right? We can make exports competitive, so more exports will be there, automatically imports will be reduced, and trade deficit will come down, current account deficit will come down. All these are going to be the advantages if you depreciate. Is there any endeavor from RBI side to appreciate or depreciate rupee? Actually no. Okay, RBI never endeavors for appreciation or depreciation of rupee. Rather, RBI's objective is basically to stabilize the exchange rate of rupee. I'll just write it down, this exchange rate management policy. So RBI does not endeavors to appreciate or depreciate rupee, and what it does, the prime objective is intervention intervention in the forex market, is to stabilize. How and why RBI is actually interfering in the forex market is basically to stabilize the exchange rate of rupee, is to stabilize the exchange rate of rupee. Okay, so I hope this is actually the exchange rate management policy of RBI. I hope this is clear for all of you. So now we will move to today's topic. It's actually, I want to discuss about two concepts, nominal effective exchange rate and real effective exchange rate. Many students have this confusion between this. So most of the students are actually preparing just by reading the definition without actually understanding this concept. And most of the students actually don't know NEER or REER is actually an index number. They think that it is an exchange rate. When you see nominal effective exchange rate, it's actually not exchange rate, it's actually an index number. I'll tell you what I mean by index number and all those things here. We have in fact discussed a lot about this in previous videos, but the topic of today's discussion is actually effective exchange rate. Okay, so what is the effective exchange rate? See, why we are actually discussing about this is, let's suppose dollar is appreciated by 10%, and pound is also appreciated by 10%. Which one is actually going to make more impact for us? Okay, so that is actually the question. See, the dollar is around 67, this pound is around 100. So which one will be making more impact? 10% change of this will make more impact, or 10% change of this will make more impact. When you look at mathematical terms, actually this will make impact, but we are not talking about math terms and simply in percentage. We have to understand the trade volume, because everything is related to trade. More transaction is with respect to dollar or pound is what we are looking for. If it is dollar, it doesn't matter what is actually the exchange or market rate of dollar. Okay, if the volume of transaction is more with dollar, then that is actually going to affect us. Suppose we have no trade with Kenyan currency or some African countries, we are not bothered about whether their currency is appreciating or depreciating. That is no way going to affect us. How is it going to affect us? It is going to affect us only if we have a trade relation with that particular country. So here, that is what we are actually going to discuss here. So you'll understand it soon. The first topic that I want to discuss is nominal effective exchange rate. Okay, so nominal effective exchange rate, what is this? This is what you call as NEER. Let me write down the definition first, and after that we will see the explanation. Okay, so it is the weighted geometric mean of the bilateral exchange rates of the domestic currency vis-a-vis currencies of major trading partner. Okay, so you can see here it is a weighted geometric mean of the bilateral exchange rates of the domestic currency vis-a-vis currencies of major trading partners. We are not concerned about the countries with which we don't have trade volume. Okay, so we are considering those countries with which we have huge trade volume, so their currencies will be taken into consideration while calculating this NEER or nominal effective exchange rate system. And we had a 6 basket. Okay, so we have a 6 currency index, and we also have a 36 currency index. For this I'll come to this later. Okay, now let's try to understand what is NEER actually. Okay, it is actually an index number. NEER is an index number, it's not an exchange rate. I'll make it clear. So NEER is an index number. What do you mean by index number? Index numbers are actually used to measure change. Now which change you are going to measure here? You're actually going to measure the changes in exchange rates here. So now before, if you remember, we have talked about WPI, and I've told you WPI is an index number, and how you write that WPI, you will write as put a colon, and then you will have a base year. Okay, so when you talk about any index number, there has to be a base year and there has to be a base value. So there will be a base year. Now the base year is 2011-12. We have discussed this, equal to 100. So this is actually the base value. From there you start understanding the change. Now let's suppose in 2018-19 this value is actually increased. WPI values increased to, let's say, 187.5. Now what does this mean? This means that 87.5% change is there, increase is there in the prices of items. Okay, so 87.5% inflation is there. This is how you will understand inflation. How much inflation is there? The things which you bought for 100 rupees in 2011-12, if you need to buy those same items, now how much you need to spend? 187.5 rupee. That means 87.5% inflation is there. That means you're actually understanding the change. Exactly like this WPI, we are talking about NEER. So how will you write this NEER? I'll take a different ink. NEER colon, the base year you will write 2004-5 equal to 100. The base value will be 100. See, like WPI, we have already discussed about CPI, we have discussed about GDP deflator. In fact, we have discussed about Sensex also. Okay, and the base year I've told you 1978, which was not changing. I've discussed with you the reasons why it is not changing also. Okay, so NEER here. Now let's suppose, like what I've told you here, values increased. Now let's suppose if I'm saying NEER now equal to 75. What does this mean? This means that rupee depreciated. Okay, so this actually shows rupee depreciated. Rupee depreciated means it's like something which cost 100 rupee now is going to cost 75 rupee for a foreigner. Before, let's suppose $1 is actually 100, now $1 is 75. So before he is giving $1 for this item which cost 100 rupee, now you are giving the same dollar and you are getting for 75, right? So it's like that only. So rupee depreciates. That means things are actually going to be cheaper for the foreigner. So he is going to get more for $1. Now earlier you are getting 75 worth item, now you are going to get 100 worth item, and the opposite will actually happen in India case, because there it is appreciation, here it is depreciation. So how much depreciation is there? 25% depreciation is there from the base year. What is the base year? 2004-5. So how will you write? 25% depreciation since 2004-5. So this is what actually you can understand from the NEER value. Now see, it is one thing that you need to understand is this is not an exchange rate, it is actually an index number. Okay, so which measures the change in exchange rate. And even if, see, the base year, if I am changing from 2004-5, the 75 will automatically become 100. Okay, so that is why I told you that's a base value, and NEER is actually measuring the change, which is not an index number. RBI, IMF all have different nominal effective exchange rates. It all depends on the currency index. Okay, so now so far we have discussed about three type of exchange, right? We have discussed about market exchange rate, right? That and then we have discussed about purchasing power parity based exchange rate. Now we are actually talking about NEER. So three types we have discussed. Now tell me which one among this actually shows competitive strength of your economy or our economy. So this is market rate. Now market rate is actually not going to give you the actual value or real worth of the dollar. Market rate will be always high, and we know this is around 67. Why it is high? Because dollar is a hard currency and everybody demand dollar. So in the market the price of dollar will be always high, but that doesn't mean that dollar will actually give you 67 rupee worth. Okay, so the dollar may not have that worth, the real worth may be different. So that you will understand from PPP. What is this purchasing power parity exchange rate? It's like this only. Suppose you are spending $1 in US, and what all things you can buy over there. Take the standard items and take the same items here. If you need to buy those items in India, how much you need to spend? So that will actually give you the real worth of dollar. How much you are getting there, what all things you get there for $1 to get that items here, how much you need to spend. And that is around 18 rupee. Okay, so the real worth of dollar is actually 18 rupee. And that's why for comparisons and calculations and etc. of GDP etc. we use purchasing power. So if you remember before we have discussed about this national income, let's say 160 lakh crore, and this was in rupee. So what you need to do, you need to convert into dollar for the comparison, right? Because you need to know which is the largest economy, and also you need to obviously convert into dollar. So here there are two possible conversions are there. Either you can convert by using market rate, or you can convert by using exchange rate. So if you convert this at market rate, this is going to be around 2.25 trillion. Trillion dollar is your national income. If you convert based on this, it is around 8.5 trillion dollar. So obviously you can see here, if you convert on the basis of purchasing power is going to be huge, and we are the third largest economy in terms of purchasing power. Okay, so I hope this is actually clear. So NEER, we are on NEER value just now we have discussed as 75. Okay, So now which one is showing the competitive strength of economy? So this one is talking about dollar in comparison with dollar. This also we are comparing it with the dollar. So, but this will give you the real worth of dollar. But this one is actually weighted average. That means a basket of currencies are there. So weighted average of those currencies of the major trading partners. So this actually will give you the competitive strength of dollar. But which one is using for actual transaction? Because that is market rate. This is using for actual transaction. Which one is used for calculation, comparison, analysis? PPP is actually used for understanding the analysis. And this shows overall appreciation and depreciation, whether appreciation is there or depreciation is there. So actually this will actually talk about the competitive strength of your economy. So I hope this is this discussion is clear for you. Now let's move towards REER. Okay, so real effective exchange rate. Okay, so that is REER. So this is also an index number. Now this is real. Before we discussed about nominal, what is the difference between nominal and real? We have done enough discussions. We have talked about nominal national income, real national income, nominal domestic income, real domestic income, all those things. So real is nothing but nominal you take, adjust it with inflation. So in real, the adjustment is made as per inflation. So it's like this. Let's suppose what is national income? We have discussed it already. NNP at factor cost is your national income, and you can take it at current prices, or you can take it constant prices, right? So current price means the current value that involves inflation, the increase in prices. Constant means it is a base year price, okay, based on base year value. Okay, so this, if you calculate NNP factor cost at constant price, you call it as real national income. If you go for current, you will call it as nominal national income. Now from nominal national, because when you get from the market you'll get nominal only. So how to get the real one? You can use GDP deflator. We have already discussed all these concepts and everything we have done. You can just join this Telegram channel which I have told you. You can get all those videos that we have done so far. Okay, so again, when you talk about domestic income, what was that? NDP at factor cost. That again you can take it current. So if you take it current, you'll get nominal domestic income, and if you take a constant price, you will actually get real domestic income. So exactly like that only. So here real effective exchange rate means nominal that you are going to adjust for inflation. Okay, and what is it actually going to give you, and everything I'll actually discuss here. So let me write down the definition first. It is a weighted geometric mean of bilateral exchange rates of the domestic currency adjusted for relative levels of inflation. I mean, I'm talking about price levels vis-a-vis currencies of major trading partners. Okay, so this is same for this part, and this also same from the nominal, and this is what this is what the difference. It is actually adjusted for relative levels of price level or inflation. Now REER is also an index number. So how will you write that? REER is, put a colon, 2004-5 equal to 100. So this is actually the base year. Now before I've told you, see, if inflation is more in India, that will be reflected here. So what will happen? This will increase to, let's say, 105. So REER value will be like 105. What does that mean? Inflation is more in India. But NEER will be, like just now I have discussed already, depreciation is there. So NEER is 75. Okay. So what you can understand from here is, from a foreigner perspective, the goods in India is actually cheaper because depreciation happened. As per NEER, this is actually going to be cheaper because of depreciation of rupee. But because of inflation, that items are going to be dearer or expensive. So even though depreciation is there, but foreigners can't buy because of inflation. Now if you remember, in the previous session I have discussed about three paradoxes. The first one is more important in that. The paradox of depreciation of rupee. The depreciation of rupee is on one side, and increasing trade deficit. Okay, so paradox of depreciation of rupee and increase in trade deficit. See, this should not happen. Why? Because depreciation of rupee means there are a lot of advantage, because the exports are going to be competitive, you'll get more, so you'll export more. Imports are going to be, very you have to pay more, so you reduce import. So exports will increase and import will reduce, so automatically trade deficit will come down. So it has to come down, instead it increased. Why it increased? Because exports are not increased. Why exports are not increased? Despite the fact that rupee is depreciated and the items are going to be cheaper for the foreigner in terms of depreciation of rupee, but Indian items were expensive because very high inflation was there. So in terms of domestic inflation, these goods are expensive, and that's what actually REER show you here. So here you can see cheaper because of depreciation, but this will actually show you inflation. So actually it is expensive. Why? Because of the domestic inflation. Okay, so this REER actually shows Indian goods are cheaper or expensive for foreigners. Now you see one more case. If inflation levels are same in India and other countries, then what is NEER? NEER, as we have discussed, it is 75, which will also be equal to REER, right? Because you don't want to now adjust. Both are same in different other countries or the major trading partners. Inflation level or the price levels are almost same. There is not much difference. Then NEER will be equal to REER. So ultimately, what is REER? REER is nothing but NEER adjusted for inflation. So the key takeaway here is that nominal effective exchange rate, even though we are talking about exchange rate, this is actually an index number. This actually measures the change in exchange rate. So I hope this is clear for all of you. If you have any doubt in anything related to civil service exams, you can actually get in touch with me here, and please join the Telegram channel. You can get all the videos over there. Okay, so see you guys. Thank you.